I think one of the things about this region, about Southeast Asia and about South Asia and the broader Asian region, when it comes to freedom of expression, is that it really, in many respects, is modeling what's happening around the world. What we see in Asia, again, across the region, is real severe restrictions on freedom of expression, particularly on journalists. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of kind of a percolating of attacks on what many governments like to talk about as false information, or what is called elsewhere fake news. So there have been a lot of problems in both of those areas, and obviously I think in terms of the profile of the issue, probably the one that most people are familiar with around the world is the jailing of two Reuters journalists, Wallon and Jia Sa-U, who've been in prison for over a year at this point, and they've been sentenced to 7 years in prison. That's one of the most severe cases of an attack on journalists, merely for their reporting, and in fact for their reporting on matters of the highest public interest. But I think we're seeing that kind of attack on journalism elsewhere throughout the region. We saw it in the run-up to the elections in Cambodia, with very serious restrictions, including virtually the takeover of one of the major independent papers in Phnom Penh. We've seen attacks on so-called fake news in places like Malaysia, and the possibility of legislation and even criminalization of false information in dissemination of false information in Singapore. So a number of these trends, again, that we're seeing around the world, we're also seeing here in this region. I'm particularly concerned with those countries, but also with Vietnam, where we've seen increasing repression of expression in independent media over recent years, in Laos, in the Philippines, where we've seen attacks on Maria Ressa and Rappler, and journalism more generally. So there are a number of problems out there, but I do think that there's hope, and I would say there's hope in two ways, two examples of hope. One is the change of government in Malaysia has at least led to the possibility of legal change, and there has been some commitment, hopefully no backsliding, on commitment to change things like the fake news law, and hopefully the Sedition Act and other areas of law that repress media and independent voices. The other thing that is just that should make us all optimistic is the strength of civil society across the region. It's regional organizations like Forum Asia and APC. It's grassroots organizations in individual countries. It's the connections that all of these different CSOs are forming with one another and learning from one another. So as they see governments learning from each other about modes of repression, civil society is learning together how to deal with that. So I think that in spite of the long odds and the repression, there's a lot of hope out there. There are reasons to be optimistic, and my hope, just personally, is that I can spend more time in the region in order to learn from civil society activists and to encourage governments to do the right thing and not to take action against independent voices, and to remove legal restrictions in the future.